Hi readers, welcome back. Mrs. Malstedt here. I'm so glad you're joining me today. Readers, today we're going to be working on ways that readers use different ways of reading. So anytime we get to any type of text, especially informational or expository texts that teach us, we always want to start with a text walk or a way to preview the text and get a feel for what the text is going to mostly be about. So as you're going through, looking at the pictures and the captions and other text features, you want to think to yourself, what will this mostly be about? Also, readers, as you go through and do your text walk, something else that's helpful is to think, what sort of text is this? So when we're reading informational texts that teach us, it could be expository, like our Emperor Penguin books that taught us all about emperor penguins and their structures and habitats and so on. But sometimes through our text walk, we might also notice that it's not your traditional expository text that teaches us. It could be a narrative nonfiction, meaning that the author's teaching us about a person through a narrative structure where it seems like a story, but we're learning facts about somebody, like in a biography. So it sounds like a story, but really it's teaching us. And then something else that's going to help you really dive more deeply into your reading and understanding of the text is to also think, what do I already know about this topic? If you can take what you already know and think about those experiences as you're reading different texts, that's going to help you understand even more deeply. So we're going to try that work today with a text that is a narrative nonfiction. So if you recall, just a regular expository informational text just teaches us facts like in the Penguin book. But a narrative nonfiction sometimes follows a story structure. Maybe there's a beginning, middle, and end. Maybe there's a climax and a problem and a solution. But there's also characters, but then there's also facts that we're learning. So we're going to have to switch our brains between thinking about the characters and what's happening to them, and the people that we're learning about are like our characters, but then we're also going to have to think about the new facts and information that we're learning. So you're going to be reading with two different ways to look at that text. And then something else that can help us with narrative nonfiction is to think, what's important about this story? What are the big details? What are the victories or struggles that the person that the text is focused on goes through? And what are some lessons learned? And by reading narrative nonfiction in this way, we're going to be able to make some inferences, thinking about what the author wants us to take away, some of the big themes, and why that person is important. So keep those ideas in your mind as we read together today. Today, the text that we're reading is called Fighters for Our Rights, Alice Paul and Cesar Chavez. So when I do my text walk here, I can see that it is organized in different paragraphs. Let's look at our text features here. So I do see a heading, and it says, Alice Paul, it is my right to vote. Okay, so I can see in this heading here, it's telling us what this section of the text is about. And it looks like that those might be words from our person that the text focuses on, Alice Paul. And what I know already about rights to vote is that when voting first started happening in the United States, only white men could vote. And a lot of people that I've known before named Alice were females. So I'm guessing that Alice in this case is probably also a female, and maybe she's fighting for her right to vote. Let's take a look down here. Here's a photograph. And I'm wondering if that's Alice. Let's look at the caption. Alice Paul and other suffragists celebrating passage of the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. Okay, so I'm taking what I already know and putting that together with what I think this text is going to be teaching me. So thinking about our different strategies. We've previewed the text. So what do you think this text is mostly going to be about based on our preview? I'm thinking it's going to be mostly about women's rights to vote. I did notice that there was another person mentioned in the title, Cesar Chavez, so I'm wondering what we're going to learn about him. So also I'm thinking that this is probably going to be a narrative nonfiction. It's going to sound like a story. We're going to have to follow the person, and that's going to be like our character. And then what do we already know about the topic? What do you know so far about the topic of voting and different people's rights to vote? Okay, so let's go ahead and start reading. Many Americans have worked hard to make sure that all citizens have the rights promised in the U.S. Constitution. Alice Paul and Cesar Chavez were two leaders in the fight for these equal rights. Okay, so the author has set us up with what this passage is going to be about. People working for the right to vote, and two people that worked really hard. They were leaders in that fight were Alice Paul and Cesar Chavez. Alice Paul, it is my right to vote. Before 1920, American women did not have the right to vote. Alice Paul, who was born in 1885 and passed away in 1977, believed that women should be able to vote. She thought women would be good leaders. After graduating from college, she wanted to address the problem. So she decided to join the suffragist cause to help women get the right to vote. Paul went to England. She worked alongside women and men, suffragists who supported the right of women to vote. They marched in the streets and made speeches. Alice admired how the English suffragists made their opinion known in an active way. Back home, Alice Paul pushed American suffragists to be more like those in England. She believed that it was time for women in the United States to be bolder. Paul helped organize a parade in Washington, D.C. in 1917. Around 5,000 supporters from all over the world came to march in it. People filled the city that day. Some were there for the parade. Others were there to watch Woodrow Wilson become president of the United States. Okay, so let's think about what the author is teaching us so far. Following our character, our person that this informational text is about, we know that she believed that everybody should have the right to vote, that women should have the right to vote. She thought that they could be great leaders, and she wanted to address that problem. So she knew that there was a problem, and so she's trying to solve it. So let's look at the solution that she's coming up with. So she's organizing a parade, and it's when Woodrow Wilson is about to become president. So there's lots of people there. So let's keep following that storyline and see what else we learn. Hundreds of thousands of people watched the parade. Many were unhappy and disagreed with the suffragists. They shouted that women should stay home. Marchers were pushed and tripped. More than 100 went to the hospital. Wow, readers, so it looks like the problem is getting worse. Just like in a narrative that we read, this nonfiction text has a problem, and that problem got worse. So how did the problem get worse? Yeah, and so when the people went to go march and fight for their rights, people got unhappy and they started hurting others, and over 100 people went to the hospital. Okay, so let's keep following and see if the problem gets solved. The parade was a success, though. It brought attention to the issue of women's voting rights. Alice Paul kept fighting for this cause. She was sent to jail several times, but that didn't stop her. A few years later, in 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was passed. Women finally gained the right to vote. So readers, anytime we're reading informational text and we're learning about something new, It is also important to read multiple texts on the topic to see if the information is correct. So something that I know from reading other books on this topic was that this isn't completely true. It says a few years later in 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was passed. Women finally gained the right to vote. When they're referring to women in this case, they're only referring to white women. People of color at that point still did not have the right to vote, and it took many, many more years of fighting to get that equality. So that's something also to keep in mind when you're reading informational text, is to cross-check information across multiple texts. So, readers, let's take a look at our charts to help us think about this text. So we were introduced to we can think about her like a character, Alice Paul. And we followed Alice's journey with fighting for the rights to vote. And we saw that there was a problem starting to happen with people not getting the right to vote and then going to the march. And then the problem got worse and people got hurt. However, the problem was eventually solved with the amendment of the 19th the amendment of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was passed. Sorry about that. And so white women did finally gain the right to vote. So all along the way, we also learned facts. So I want you to think to yourself, what do you think is important from this story? What are some of those big details? What was Alice's victory and struggle? And what lessons did she learn? Think to yourself for a moment. So thinking about those big details and the victories and the struggles and the lessons learned, we can infer some themes and why this person is important, what the author wants us to take away. So what do you think, readers? What does the author want us to learn from this text? So you might be thinking about not giving up. You might be thinking about how there were important people in our past that fought for our rights today. You might be thinking that Alice might be an important person because she led the way for white women to be able to vote. So yeah, lots of great takeaways. So readers, as you go off today, think about those different ways that we read. We want to preview the text, think about what sort of text it is, and think about what you already know about the topic. And if it is a narrative nonfiction, think about how you can think about it in two ways, following a story, but then also thinking about the facts you're learning along the way, and that will help you even better understand the text. I invite you to give that a try. Happy reading!